So, starting off Atheira's interview, the first thing we see is in the background the Kingdom of Kiel, Quil. I like to spell things weird. As of right now, you're heading on the road west outside of the city, I believe. First things first, how are you traveling? What would Atheira be doing? You could potentially have bought a horse, you could be walking and backpacking, you could even hire a carriage, but that's obviously going to run you some money. What's the method of travel here?
For now, she is going to be walking. She might pick up a carriage or a horse later on down the road, but for now she prefers to walk.
Fantastic. And then let's start with this. What does Atheira look like? We see this young woman walking through the streets. What sort of picture can you paint with that?
Yeah, so she is a wood elf. She's about average height and build, hitting around 5'5". She's not particularly athletic, but she's not weak. Lithe, but not fragile. She has deep green eyes that are about the first thing that draws your attention to a face which is framed by long, dark blonde hair. There's kind of a warmth and curiosity in her eyes, but they're balanced against a severity of a strong jawline and some strong cheekbones. She looks deep in thought, and she almost always looks deep in thought, just paying enough attention to the road not to trip, but otherwise she might as well be somewhere else.
And with that being incredibly deep in thought, what's the surface level thoughts that she's got right now? You know, how's traveling going? What's the forefront of her mind? What's plaguing our lovely traveler here?
Yeah, so she hasn't traveled much before, so a lot of it is nerves. She's thinking about home. She's kind of looking over her shoulder and just trying to wrestle with the fact that she's excited. She knows that she's going where she needs to go, but she's also on edge about what this future might be bringing and how she's going to deal with that.
Wonderful. Well, you've been traveling outside the city for, I want to say, around 30 minutes or so now. As you're walking, there's the occasional tree decorating this pathway, and coming up, there's a collection of trees. I wouldn't dare call it a forest, but definitely like a little spot with a nice cover for some shade and a pretty little place to potentially sit for a while. And you actually see a much older man. He's probably about 5'11" or 6 foot. He's got the long white hair. He's got a small white beard going on. He is currently sitting there, kind of halfway leaning on one of the trees, just watching the pathway, and he sees you walk. And as you begin to pass by, he gives you a friendly smile and a nod, and he continues looking out.
I'll kind of nod just very briefly and then go to continue on.
As you continue walking, out of the corner of your eye, you tend to notice things pretty easily, but you see him sort of glance at you, and not necessarily eye you up and down, but he's definitely sizing you up and sort of saying is she a threat? Maybe, who is she? Do I need to watch out for her? Can I turn my back to her? That sort of vibe. And after a second, you notice that you hear a message pop into your head. It just simply says the word question, Atheira.
I come to a stop, and I look behind me, assuming that he's just spoken aloud.
You see him with his finger sort of pointing at you. He smiles at you a little bit more this time, waves his hand, and then you hear the voice talk in your head again, and he says, let's talk.
I'm sorry, do I know you?
Oh, no, but you should. I am here to interview you for Ura Lumis.
Interview?
You should have gotten a letter a few weeks ago of acceptance to the school.
I got a letter, but there was no mention of an interview. I read this letter a lot. There was no mention of an interview.
I know. The system was not devised by me, and if it were, it would be much more structured. But please, let's sit, talk, and simply get this done so we can both be on our way. I promise I won't take too much of your time.
I'll go over and I'll sit next to him, but very, like, stiff and clearly, like, thrown off by this.
Yeah, you guys sort of sit in between some of these trees. He has, like, a tiny little space set aside. He grabs a couple of twigs and branches and a couple spare pieces of wood and sort of sets them on a pile as he sits down cross-legged, and you're probably about 10 feet away from him, just giving a little bit of space. And to show you what this guy looks like, that is our lovely professor here. Definitely older looking. You see the long ears denoting an elf. He's got those pale hazel eyes to him. He's wearing these sort of outdoorsy robes. You can definitely tell he's got a little bit of a money thing to him. He definitely looks like he's well taken care of. Not many people would have separate robes just for going outside, but these sort of fit the vibe of where you're in, these nice brown, earthy tones. He sits down cross-legged and starts organizing this stuff together, and he says, I am Professor Beren. It is wonderful to meet you. I already know your name is Atheira.
She just nods.
Well, before we continue with the interview, I should give you the opportunity to introduce yourself. For the sake of the school, who is Atheira? Describe yourself.
I'm Atheira. There's not much else. I come from a small town of very little consequence. Grew up with my aunt and uncle, and yeah, that's pretty much me.
Sure. As you're talking, he, you see him sort of reach into the space beside him, like in the air. There's nothing there, but he reaches, and then part of his hand disappears, and then he pulls out like a small chest, it looks like, and he sets it on the ground. And as you're talking, he's looking at you and being respectful, nodding his head along. You see him pulling out these, like, some cups, a plate, a little kettle even, and then almost like not necessarily a grill, but like a stand to hold something on. And he's pulling this stuff out as you talk, and as you finish, he sets the chest back into that little ethereal space. And he says, well, yes, that's all good information. I suppose I should be a little more specific. At the school, there are various classifications of the specialization you wish to follow as a student. Are you coming to the school with any prior training or gifts or abilities, I should say?
I mean, I can do the odd magic druid craft, I guess is what they call it. There weren't many people in my village that were magic, so my training is very hit or miss, just things that I happen upon. So not much.
Sure. But you can influence the elements, plants, life itself. What is your specialty there?
Plants, animals. I do very well with animals.
Excellent. I think you'll fit right in with our druid program. We can get you signed up for that. And you said you have a slight, not expertise, but experience with magic.
Slight, yes.
So if I were to ask you to and he points down at where he has set up sort of like this grill and kettle area, and you see him like adding some water that he got from a container and leaves into the kettle on top of where he made the like little pile of leaves and sticks and things like that. And he says, if I were to ask you to ignite this small potential fire, would you be able to?
Yeah, I think so. And I look at the fire, and I seem to put a fair bit of concentration into it, and attempt to druidcraft and light a fire there.
Sure. I'm going to be honest, I don't even know if druidcraft can do that, but
I think so.
let's hope so. Yeah, we'll allow it. Why not? Rule of cool, right? You concentrate on that little thing, and after a couple seconds, the twigs and branches and leaves combust and a small fire begins. Professor Beren fans it with his hand a little bit, and it grows and grows until the kettle starts actively being heated. And he sits back for a second, letting that rest, and he says, so, now that we have that started, we can have a proper conversation. I have plenty of questions to ask you, but it would be amiss if I were not to give you the opportunity first. Is there anything I can answer for you?
If you wouldn't mind, I have been wondering, how big is the school?
Well,
like people.
Yeah, in comparison to other schools, it's actually quite small. I would say at any given point we have 80 to 100 students. We have maybe 30 staff members. Classes are typically anywhere from 2 to 8 students on average. So it's very small, very intimate.
That's nice. Do you teach the Druidic Studies department?
Oh, no. If only I were so blessed. I'm a professor of wizardry. I have researched and taught arcane magic for plenty of lifetimes.
Do you know, do they allow animals in the dorms, in the Druidic wing?
Yes, of course. Students are allowed to have pets if they fit in the room, and any destruction you cause, you're expected to fix, obviously, but no, should you acquire or have an animal companion, that should be totally fine.
And between this conversation and also she's just with like the whole process of the tea brewing, that's something that's very comfortable and endearing to her. She kind of like takes a sigh, and she's visibly a little bit more relaxed.
And with that, you start to get a little bit more relaxed, and you could probably assume that he picks up on that. He grabs some of the cups and plates and things that he had pulled out of that little box, and he takes the kettle and gently pours out his first cup and hands it to you. You take it very gingerly, and he pours himself one. He takes a sip and says, right, now we can actually continue with the interview. So, I do have some questions that I'm supposed to make notes on, but the first of which is very simple. Out of all of the potential places to study Druidic magic and abilities, why Ura Lumis? Why not go to one of the many Druid tribes around Wisteria, Timera? I know Althus is very popular. There are plenty of Druids in Bosk. Why our little school?
Well, honestly, I had never really heard of Ura Lumis before. In our village, nobody leaves. It's very tight-knit, and I always had a slight interest in getting out. I didn't quite feel like I fit in there, but there was no way. I didn't really know that that was an option until that letter arrived. And yeah, I showed my aunt and uncle this, and it was reason enough for them to trust me to leave, and so there really was never any option but Ura Lumis.
Excellent. I think that's as good of a reason as any. The next, do you have any formal training behind you before arriving at the school?
Nothing to this extent. I mean, I helped out a lot when animals would run into the village and start causing a problem. I would help some of the locals with that, but other than that and your basic schooling, no.
Excellent. We have most of our students are completely fresh. Helps to build from the ground up rather than building off of someone else's work or potentially taking that down and rebuilding. So everything is perfectly in order there. Another important question. Do you work well with others? Do you have a experience working in groups at the school? You'll be expected to participate in a group of anywhere from 3 to even 6, 7, 8 people.
No, I don't, actually.
Right. Should not be an issue. He finishes up his tea and sets everything off to the side. He waves his hand and the fire goes out. And then let the kettle cool off. He sort of straightens his back up a little bit and he says, well, do you have any other questions or comments for me?
She looks up the road and just kind of points. I am going in the right direction, right?
No. I was going to attempt to correct you gently, but you'll want to, and he turns the opposite way that you pointed, go back down the road about 20 minutes of walking, and then instead of heading north like you're doing now, you'll want to head southwest. So you'll take a right from here.
It would be really helpful if they included a map with the letter.
It would. But where's the fun in that?
I don't think it's fun at all.
He stands up and wipes the dirt off of himself, and then you watch as he sort of twirls his hand, and all of the tea set that you would set down and the stuff that was on the fire float and move and organize himself back into this box that lands in his hand, and then he sets it back in that little compartment in space, whatever you want to call that. And he stands up to his full height, quite a few inches taller than you. And he looks at you and he says, right, well, that's all I have. You seem like you'll fit in quite well. I don't think there will be any issues on that regard. Clearly not a danger to the school. Well, I suppose I'll be on my way. And he turns to leave and then sort of stops himself and he says, oh, I almost forgot. He walks over to you. Are you sitting down or standing up at this point?
I'm still sitting.
Cool. He walks over a couple feet away from you, still giving you some space, and he kneels down beside you, and he pulls out a little, it looks like a little velvet bag, and he says, I figured you would appreciate having someone look out for you. This might help. And he hands you the little bag. And then he says, I'll be on my way. Hope to see you soon. And then you watch as he begins walking, and then he makes a little incantation with his hands, and then his body just blinks out of existence.
I kind of like watch the space where he left for a few seconds, trying to see, like, kind of want to figure out what he did, but also very aware that I'm not smart enough right now to figure out what he did. And then I'll take the bag and like gingerly open it to like see what's inside.
Yeah, you open the bag and pull out a tiny little ring, which I have a picture for, so I'll show you. It's this, I don't want to say simple, because it's really not. It looks pretty ornate and pretty nice, but it's a simple silver band with what looks like a dark maroon colored gemstone inlaid in the top. And then it has these little gold clasps on it, that little silver, it almost looks like a chain going around it with that gemstone sort of front and center, circular. Very pretty, but also subtle in a way.
She like look at it, kind of hold it up to the sun, spend a number of moments just kind of inspecting it, and then I'll go ahead and I'll put it on.
You put it on. You don't feel anything immediately, but as you put it on and sort of set the bag to the side, you see a little note slip out of the bag. You go ahead, you pick that up and you read it. And it says, should anyone hope to pry your past from you, this should make that significantly safer. But you put the ring on, you feel that it's definitely a magical item. You know that, but you're not quite sure what it is yet.
After reading the note, she folds it up very carefully, puts it back in the bag, regards the ring again, this time with a little bit more like appreciation for it, and then she'll turn and start heading back to go the direction that she was redirected.
And with that, we pan out over the beautiful landscape. There are mountains off to the west, which is the direction you're heading. You're probably going to have to go south and loop around to get to your destination, but you head off, backtracking a bit on your way to the school.